I posted a link on prophecyhour.com to an article with the headline that reads, Iran attack decision nears. Israeli elite locks down. In other words, they're not talking about what they're going to do, and some things are really pointing to maybe an attack on Iran. Like I say, there's been several things that happened recently. One of them is like the super coalition of the Israeli government, and also the call-up of 6 battalions of reservists. What's it all about? Tonight we will talk about this and more with Bill Salus, who is an author, researcher, radio talk host, and a lecturer. He's the author of the book Israelistine, The Ancient Blueprints of the Future of the Middle East, and he's also a co-author of a book called How to Overcome the Most Frightening Issues You Will Face This Century, the second book I haven't read. He also has a new book out called Revelation Road, and so let's just now welcome Bill Salus. Are you there with me, Bill?
I am here, Pastor Dan. Thanks for having me on your program tonight.
Well, thanks for being back on with us. You were on with us before, and I think we talked about your book, Israelistine. But please tell the folks a little bit more about yourself, just like, for one, how did you become a Christian?
Well, yes, Pastor Dan. I became a Christian around 1991. I was attending a study on the book of Revelation taught by a Bible prophecy teacher named Chuck Missler. I had been through a long history of sojourning. I went through Eastern religions, became a Kriya yogi in Hinduism, and had all kinds of another story there, which is a whole other radio program.
Really? I would like to talk to you about that, being into Hinduism and that kind of thing. But go ahead.
Yeah, and so I was not interested in God. I was disillusioned by the Hinduism and all that sort of thing, but it happened to be kind of coincidentally that there was a church right next door to my office where I worked, and Chuck Missler was teaching on Bible prophecy. When I went and attended these studies, I was amazed at his teaching, for one, but the fact that the Lord, in His holy word, could predict the end from the beginning. He declares this in Isaiah 46, verses 9 and 10, that only He can declare the end from the beginning, things not yet done. And I was just astounded by that, so I started to really dig into it. Once I get into something, I really get into something. And that's what led me to the Lord. I started attending some church services subsequently and accepted Jesus, repented, and became born again. But it was Bible prophecy that led me to the Lord. And it says in Revelation 19:10 that the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus. So one of the things I like to do with my ministry, which is called Prophecy Depot Ministry, is to use prophecy, which is about a third of the Bible, as an evangelical tool. It's one of the ways, especially in these days with so much going on, like you were talking about in your intro, it is one of the primary ways that we can bring people to the Lord by telling them that the Bible had a lot to say about the things that you're seeing going on in the world around you. And the reason God gives us this Bible prophecy is not to impress us, but to inform us, because He loves us, about the stuff that's coming, and He wants us to be prepared for it. And our response in return to that, a loving God that cares that much, should be to worship Him, and it can be used as an evangelical tool.
Well, amen. Very well put. Yeah, absolutely. He gives us these things because He loves us, and it's an amazing thing when we look around. We look at the Word, but we look around us and we see these things happening. It's all explained there right in the world. Although there is also that other thing that the Bible predicted. There's a lot of false prophets out there, and I caution people that are on the internet because you can find a belief or a twist in just about any way that you want to.
Well, this is true in we're cautioned in Acts 17:11 that one of the things that we need to suggest to people that are interested in Bible prophecy is that they do become a Berean. Paul said that the Bereans, they were more fair-minded than even those in Thessalonica, in that they received the word with all readiness, but searched the Scriptures daily to find out whether these things were so that they were taught. And that's the point. I've had people send me studies. I'm sure you get your share of studies that get emailed to you, and they've taken one thing out of context and written a whole novel or a whole book or something out of one thing that. And so you do. You have to be careful, and you have to go to check with several sources, and be in the Spirit when you're studying these things.
Well, what I find a lot is, and we'll get into tonight's program, but I find a lot in some of those things that they send. And before it was the internet, for the last 30 years, I did a newsletter since about the middle 90s, and people would send me big long studies in the mail. And just if you scanned it, it might look okay, but then if you really read it and read the whole thing, then you can find those errors. And sometimes there may only be one little error, but it's definitely a salvational error or one that'll lead you astray. And so, but that's what I find, Bill. I find a lot of people are shying away from reading. We need to encourage them to read the Word.
Well, we do, and the Word is a very important thing that we need to understand. It's God-breathed, according to 2 Timothy 3:16, that the man of God be thoroughly equipped for every good work. It's good for reproof and correction and instruction. We're told in Acts that the whole counsel of God, including Bible prophecy, should be taught. But there's not a lot of that being taught right now. And I tell people that if you really want to know your bearing in the world right now and where you're at on the timeline, you have to have your Bible open. You don't just rely on CNN or Fox News. You've got to be reading the Scriptures to see how these things are written, because there's so many things, stage setting. This stuff going on in the Middle East that you brought forward has all kinds of prophetic ramifications. Even the Arab Spring, we could spend plenty of time talking about that, and really, what was that? Is there going to be a bunch of democracies coming up? Was that a youth bulge that was driven by the social networks to look outside of the confines of 7th century Islam and state-censored media for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Well, that'd be great. We hope that's the case, but Western-style democracies popping up in the Middle East apart from Israel, it's just not going to happen, Dan.
Right, absolutely. Because, and the people that believe that have not even glanced at the theology of the Islamic people, because it's just not within their hearts and their minds to do that. It would be going against the Quran, and so they can't do it. So why don't you start taking us into this? We've had a lot of things happen, like the Arab Spring. You can start where you want, but then we want to get into these recent developments with Israel. Take us into what the Scriptures say.
Well, let's do that. Let's start with the Arab Spring. It was an amazing thing in 2011 because it'll give us sort of an overview of what's happening in the Middle East, why it's getting very climactic over there, and then we can get into some real specifics. Did the Bible talk about Israel and Iran and the kind of potential nuclear strike that we were pretty much expecting to happen now over there? And this coalition, what does that mean? Why did that form in Israel out of nowhere? This broadest coalition in Israel's history.
Right.
Let's start with the Arab Spring. It started out noble. Mohamed Bouazizi of Tunisia, he was looking for opportunity over there, and he was a fruit vendor, didn't feel as much opportunity. He set himself afire at the end of 2010 and actually died like January 4th or 5th, and from his self-afflicted burns. And all of a sudden, a bunch of other Tunisians started to set themselves ablaze protesting, and this thing just amazed over into Egypt and started spreading all the way throughout the Middle East. Arabs wanted, especially the youth bulge, they wanted to protest what they've been going through, the dictatorships and things like that. So again, we see all this protest going on, and we see these dictators starting to be deposed or assassinated. We had Tunisia's Ben Ali had been the president over there for 23 years, and all of a sudden he steps down promptly. It was the first time ever in Arab history that by popular protest a leader had stepped down. Mubarak was next. 30 years he had reigned over in Egypt. Then you had Gaddafi, who had been in Libya for 42 years. Of course, he got assassinated, I think it was around October of 2011. King Abdullah Saleh of Yemen, we don't hear much about him. He'd reigned over the Yemenites for 34 years. He stepped down around November of 2011. You also had two other Arab leaders, bin Laden, of terrorist leaders, and Anwar al-Awlaki. You had major leaders happening. Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, there was just, I don't know what was a glitch. Maybe it was in my microphone. Go ahead. We're talking about the Arab leaders stepping down, which was simply amazing.
Yeah, and so, this is amazing, and I have to reflect on what did Daniel 2:21 say? It says, "It is the Lord who changes times and seasons, who removes and raises kings, and gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those that have understanding." When Daniel wrote, they didn't have prime ministers and presidents and things like that. They had kings, and it says the Lord is the one who changes times and seasons. Well, we are seeing a major season of change in the Middle East. This Arab Spring was a season of change, and we have seen kings being removed, and we are starting to see kings be raised. You're going to have a presidential election on May 23rd in Egypt. And, who's going to come in the vacuum? What leaders are going to come in? Are they going to be Western-style democracy pushing for, capitalism in the Middle East? Or are they going to be, a pro-Palestinian and anti-Semitic toward Israel? And the reason I'm going to say it's the latter of the two choices is because these countries, every one of them that was in the North African continent and the Middle East that was involved in the Arab Spring, they're all in end times Bible prophecies. Whether you line up Egypt and Syria in Psalm 83, and or you put Tunisia and Libya into Ezekiel 38, they're all in end times Bible prophecies that come to invade Israel for various reasons. So,
let me interject for a moment. Folks, these countries that he mentioned, you can just about find a listing of them in Ezekiel 38, even though I don't believe Ezekiel 38 is here yet, but you can see these lining up, and for those of us that are in Bible prophecy, it's just like, really, this is happening? And we know that the Muslim Brotherhood is the predominant pushing force in those, and they're not going to have anything less than Sharia law. Back to you, Bill.
Well, and that's the telltale sign over there. There's an old saying that as goes Egypt, so goes the rest of the Middle East. Egypt has about 80 million Arabs living in it. It's the most heavily populated Arab country in the Middle East. What we're watching there is very much different than what the liberal pundits had thought. We've had 3 parliamentary elections since Mubarak stepped down, and you have about 71% of the electorate are either from the Muslim Brotherhood or the Salafist al-Noor party, strict Islamic parties that are pushing for Sharia law in that country, that consider the peace treaty with Israel as a national security threat. Every presidential candidate, now we're talking about presidential elections happening actually next week, starting there, and if it all goes well, on May 23rd, they'll actually inaugurate the president around July of this year, and then the military leadership will start to step away. That's what they want over there. Mm-hmm. But every one of the presidential candidates is promising to review the peace treaty with Israel. There was a big debate on TV with 2 of the front runners, and the conversation between Egypt and back and forth, one of the top topics is, what do we do with Israel? It's like Israel is the centerpiece. It's the elephant in the room over there and all the Arabs have a problem with. I mean, that's what we got.
Yeah, absolutely. And a short time ago, I wished I would have wrote it down or brought up the article, but there was a meeting, folks, of some of the potential new Middle East leaders and already current leaders that did just that with President Obama. Had a conference about just the subject you said, Bill. What are we going to do about Israel? And, that's a spooky thing, but not. I mean, the more that we see of it, the more that I know that our Savior is going to return. But we got to go through some stuff first, as you're telling us.
Well, we do, and the problem is if we see these countries, especially the supposed moderate ones like Egypt and Jordan, and these treaties that they've got with Israel and Egypt and Israel and Jordan, they're paper thin now, and will probably be shredded. In my honest evaluation, I think the end result is that Egypt will break their peace treaty with Israel, and then they'll leave Jordan standing alone, waving their treaty in the air, and everybody's going to look at them like a fish out of water and say, "What are you doing with the treaty with Israel?" And they'll follow suit. And ultimately, with the departure of all these leaders, apart from Muammar Gaddafi, who came into power I think it was around 1969, just before the Yom Kippur War, and he was busy trying to run his country and develop it and all that sort of thing. So he wasn't much part of any of the Arab-Israeli wars. Every one of the leaders that have been deposed, assassinated, or whatever, apart from Muammar Gaddafi, were post-war Arab Israeli war leaders.
Right.
They came in after Yom Kippur. So that passing of the Arab Guard is gone now. And the vacuum is dangerous. What you're seeing there, especially in Egypt, that's the telltale country over there. Look at Syria. It's going absolutely nuts as well. And Bashar Assad he needs to find some fix in his situation to come out. And a lot of people are concerned that, he's got his sights on Israel. Technically they've never made peace with Israel. He, at the end of last year, threatened that if anything happened to his country with NATO intervention or anything like that, the first thing he would do, and he was very specific, he said, in 6 hours, I will send missiles into Tel Aviv. Well, Israel wasn't doing anything. Israel wasn't saying, go get Syria. And yet, it's Israel. They don't like Israel. As much as the Arabs fight amongst each other, the common thread that unites them is this hatred of Israel.
Absolutely. And you know what, also that we're seeing it in the backlight of it, you see that, just as we were seeing in Syria. In fact, I had a report from a man that's in military intelligence that contacted me and talked to me about some Russian troops that have went in and are there in Syria right now. That would have been about 6 weeks ago. But my point is this, is Russia, is really in the backdrop of all these things, helping with arms and different things. Do you see that?
Well, I do, and they're up to their old antics, Cold War antics before the breakdown of the Soviet Union. One of the mainstays for the Soviet Union's existence was exportation of military weapons and building up their military, and they're back up to that. They've got contracts with pretty much everybody to export weapons. Syria, they're selling Iskander missiles. They are contracting to do the S-300 missile defense system. And so you're right. They are, plus they in China, if you recall, were the ones who vetoed the UN and the American-driven attempt to have sanctions levied upon Syria because of the revolution over there. They wanted to move those sanctions against Iran and do the same thing over, keep them with Iran, but move them over to Syria. And Russia and China opposed that. And Hillary Clinton, she comes out, if you recall, and goes, well, that's despicable. Well, so what are you going to do about it? You're protesting that move, but what are you going to do about it? And when you talk about Russia, when she said that, it reminded me of this group of seeming protesters in a major invasion in the end times described in Ezekiel 38 and 39 that most of us believe is spearheaded by Russia, a coalition of 9 populations. Ezekiel specifically lists them by their ancient names, which would include Russia as Magog, and you've got Iran as Persia, and Turkey and Libya and Tunisia and some others. They're going to come against Israel. That's in the last days, by out of the nations, dwelling securely without walls, bars, nor gates, in the midst of the land. That's a very prosperous Israel because Russia covets that plunder and booty, puts this coalition together to come after them. And on the sidelines, you have Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish and their young lions, we're told, in I think it's around verse 13, that are saying, what are you doing, Russia? Are you coming for plunder and great booty? They're simply protesting. And a lot of us, Dan, believe that the merchants of Tarshish is probably a representation of the UK, and the young lions would be, perhaps America and Canada and some of the colonies of the UK when the sun never used to set on the British Empire. Of course, we went back way before that in the 1700s with them. But the point is,
I'm going to have to break in here, Bill. We're going to go to a break here in about 50 seconds, and I'm going to ask Bill to where his website is for you folks, and I'm also holding in my hand a book, and it's his new book. It's called Revelation Road, Hope Beyond the Horizon. I'm sure you can find it at his website, which is, Bill, what is your website?
ProphecyDepot.com, like Depot, Home Depot, so it's ProphecyDepot.com.
Just like Home Depot. Well, I'm sure you'll be at home if they come over there, okay? All right. Well, folks, we'll be back in about 3 minutes with Bill Salus, and when we come back, we'll talk about these recent developments in Israel and what's going on and just where we're at, and then in the latter part of the program, we'll talk about this book, Revelation Road, Hope Beyond the Horizon. We'll be right back.
Hope he comes, riding on the clouds, shining like the sun, at the trumpet call. So lift your voice, the year of Jubilee, out of Zion's new salvation comes.
Pastor Dan will be right back.
Countries have denied internet access for their people during civil strife. The FCC seized in-use commercial shortwave frequencies right after the September 11th attacks. No one communication system can be depended on to be there when you need information. You need choices. You need a KU band free-to-air satellite system from AVR. The AVR system includes a receiver, an LNB, and a 75-centimeter dish. All you need to get on your own is the coaxial cable. The system is delivered to your door for $149.99. That's right, delivered for $149.99. That's the shipping and the system, $149.99. Call 541-225-4659. That's 541-225-4659. Or visit AmericanVoiceRadio.com and click Satellite System.
Food prices going up, homes being foreclosed, unemployment insurance running out, jobs leaving the country. Many people cannot afford to eat or keep a roof over their head. Too many can do neither. Messiah's Branch has a mission church in Wichita, Kansas that helps the victims of this banker's economy, the American people. Your neighbors. The mission is the last hope for so many Americans. We need your help to lift up the poorest of the poor. These are men, women, and children who once had homes, now in the street. They all need what you need. First aid, beds, food, clothing, and so on. You can send a monetary gift or a box of necessities to 230 West 4th Street, Florence, Kansas, 66851. Or donate online by going to WichitaHomeless.com. Or simply call 316-619-4886. 316-619-4886.
Survival of the fittest. In any and all situations, survival is your number one priority. That requires being tough and thinking smart. And the folks at Freeze Dry Guy are going to help you do just that. They have the long-range patrol ration entrees, what they call the Brick Pack. When you're in survival mode, it is absolutely the best item for your survival pack or bug-out bag. You can go farther, faster, and carry more food with the LRP cold weather ration entrees. Not only do these long-lasting, durable entrees help sustain you or your family through the harshest environment or situation, they are by far the most delicious of their kind. No contest. With a variety of tasty entrees, you can't beat the LRP Brick Packs. Let Freeze Dry Guy help you in your survival situations. Go to freezedryguy.com. That's freezedryguy.com. Or call 866-404-3663. That's 866-404-FOOD.
Behold, he comes, riding on the clouds, shining like the sun. At the trumpet call, so lift your voice. It's the year of Jubilee, and out of Zion's hill salvation comes.
We're back. This is Pastor Dan Catlin, and you're listening to the Salus Branch Prophecy Hour on the American Voice Radio Network. Folks, I'd ask you to consider a donation tonight for the Father's Mission Church in Wichita, Kansas. You know, donations, we're now at that summertime slump, which leaves us counting on every last little cent that comes in. So any size donation that will help. I even have a fellow that's sending a gold ring as a donation that we're going to sell that will help us out greatly. So any kind of donation will help. We're trying to help people who have nothing. And so it's been going on 12 years, or actually better. So, you know, pray about it. The poor can't support our ministry, so we need you to do it. You can donate online by PayPal or send us a check or money order. Just go to prophecyhour.com for that information. If you need to, you can call also for the information. The phone number, of course, if you remember, is 620-878-4682, 620-878-4682. And you folks that donate online, if you want a mailed thank you note to you, and I mean coming in the U.S. mail, make sure you point it out and we will send one of those out to you, a thank you note. We don't send a receipt because we're not a 501c. We are a church and not a corporation. All donations in the mail that come in the mail automatically will get a thank you note for your records. But enough about this stuff. Most of you already know it anyway. And now we're back with something much more important. We're back talking with Bill Salus, the author of Revelation Road. Are you there with me, Bill?
I'm back with you, Pastor Dan.
I appreciate it. Oh, I always say that, and if I think, well, I know he's over there, but anyway.
It's good to know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, believe it or not, I've said that, and it was blank on the other end. We got cut off during break. But that's live radio. I love live radio. I would rather do it than any kind of pre-record. It's just, different. Anyway, let's go into this. Recently, in Israel, Netanyahu was going to call for early elections. Out of that came a surprise coalition. And then we heard right after it, I don't know if it was right after or right before, that there were 6 battalions of reservists that were pulled up, mostly along the 150-mile border with Egypt, facing the Sinai Peninsula. So what do you think, Bill?
Well, actually, I believe they were called up just before, and, you don't make that kind of move, call up 6 battalions of reservists, randomly. It's very strategic. It just happened to come on the heels of America sending an unknown number of F-22 Raptor fighter jets to the UAE, United Arab Emirates. And there were some other things of disturbing concerns. Threats going out from Israel saying to Hezbollah in Lebanon that if something happens between them and Iran, that they need to stay out of it, or it'll be catastrophic for them. And there was a war of words coming back from Hazan Nasrallah to Israel, and that. It was all going on around that time. And there's been rumors of war, forever over there in the Middle East, but this is getting a lot more heated in light of the pressures on Israel over there. So what happens is everybody wakes up one morning thinking, first of all, we're all going, why is Benjamin Netanyahu, whose term is supposed to go till the end of 2013, calling for early elections around August or September or something like that? We thought, well, okay, maybe he's looking for a broader coalition to get more support to invade Iran. Not that he needs that to invade Iran, but, maybe that's what it is. Some of us thought, well, maybe it was a decoy. Maybe Iran would think, oh, gee, we've got some time now. They're not going to attack us. They got these elections coming up. And then we wake up one morning and, what was this? This is the broadest coalition in Israel's history. He's the opposition party, Kadima, that Ehud Olmert and Tippi Livni used to be with, comes and goes signs up with Benjamin Netanyahu in the Likud. And you've got 120 members in Knesset. All of a sudden you got 94 together in a coalition. It's the broadest coalition in their history. And it's very telling who the leader of the Kadima at the time was, this individual named Shaul Mofaz, who had been born and raised in Tehran, Iran. He speaks Farsi. He immigrated to Israel in 1957 and rose to the ranks of the Israeli defense minister. He'd been involved in operational military experience and whatnot for over 40 years. He was Ariel Sharon's defense minister at the time. Matter of fact, it's interesting, if this is telling at all, that Mofaz has inside of his office a poster of Israeli warplanes flying over the Auschwitz concentration camp. So, as if to remind him on a daily basis, this is never going to happen again. So they, like you said when you introduced it, it's all high-level secret meetings these days. A lot of closed doors going on. Not a lot of information about this, which all puts all the concern up on the front of the oven here that this is going to happen. That there is going to be a nuclear. There's going to be a strike from Israel on Iran unless Iran and its proxy, Syria, Hezbollah, and Hamas do something to first strike on their behalf, which is always possible. But anyway, you look at it, we're going to wake up one morning, Dan, probably this year, because the zone of immunity that Israel's watching when any strike on Iran is not going to be effective. We're going to wake up one morning and missiles are going to be flying, and whether it's from Iran and their proxies toward Israel or vice versa, that is a big deal, because that could open up Pandora's box in the Middle East, and all the things that have been stage setting in the Arab Spring and the disgruntled Arabs and the new leadership that's going to come into being and all the missiles that are pointed at Israel from the north, the Hezbollah and whatnot. All that stuff is ready. It's alive. It's waiting. And if it doesn't appear to me as if something goes wrong over there that you're going to have another 22-day conflict with Hamas and Israel. It could be the mother of all Mideast wars over there at this point.
Well, let me interject something to the folks. Something that Bill left out, but I'm sure he knows about it. One of the reasons that we believe that it could come right now, and it's predominantly all over the news, is that if Netanyahu attacks Iran right now before the election, then it would be hard-pressed for Obama and America not to back up Israel before this election if he wants to get reelected. So that's out there, too. So a Pandora's box, you say.
Well, I do. Well, you're right. One of the concerns about this year appears to be the year. As a matter of fact, Barak, the defense minister, had said that this is the year 2012 that Israel will deal with Iran's nuclear sites. So, everybody's pretty much not wondering anymore if or how, but pretty much when at this point. And it could even be as soon as any day now, because they meet in Baghdad, the P5+1, to talk to Iran about their nuclear program in the second meeting on May 23rd, the same day of the Egyptian elections. And it happens to be on that same day, supposedly, that the Bashar nuclear plant in Iran gets a license to be considered fully operational. They've got Russian fuel rods loaded in there since August of 2010. Right. So May 23rd is this really big day. And what you've got is that Israel is concerned that the P5+1 is going to negotiate some kind of intermediate agreement with Iran. In other words, Iran's going to convince them to buy more time, and that's going to mitigate Israel's ability to strike Iran, because now there's some sort of pending agreement on the table. So, they may not even wait for that. We could wake up tomorrow and they could be doing something. Israel has been warning, Benjamin Netanyahu has been warning the world for several years, this isn't new news, that Iran is the number one existential threat to Israel, and it's a worldwide problem. And even today, Dan, a UN ambassador to Israel, Dan Shapiro from America, has come out and said, and this was reported on Haaretz, that plans to strike Iran are ready. And he's not talking about Israeli plans. He's talking about if America had to strike Iran. Those plans are available. I don't think America will, but that's forceful language coming out from Dan Shapiro, and he said all options are fully available. Yes, we prefer diplomacy, but we realize that's not going anywhere. So this is, how much more is it going to take until something happens? It's a life or death situation for Israel.
Let me intercede here. But folks, now a lot of you folks, and I've had them tell me that you've looked at this and you're trying to say, well, this is, Armageddon, this is Ezekiel 38, and this is, but folks, there is a prophecy that I even got from, a Jew brother a Jewish man that was a rabbi. He's not, a Messianic rabbi, but a rabbi on this program. And the one thing that he said, because it took me like 3 programs to get it out of him, what he believed would happen that would, before, Messiah came. And he finally said that Israel had not fulfilled the prophecy of fulfilling their riches or becoming a bountiful nation. I know you've addressed this, maybe in Psalm 83 or something. You want to brush on that?
Well, I do. Let's go ahead and devote the little bit of time we got left towards talking about specific Bible prophecies and picking up what this guy was talking about. And I would just, if I can, just take a moment to plug Revelation Road. He'll be on the horizon.
Go right ahead. You've got about 14 minutes.
Yeah, the book itself contains much of the stuff I'm about to tell you, and it details the sequence of events of wars that go on in the Middle East that happen, I believe, soon. Events happen sequentially, and each prophecy builds powerfully upon the other. Now, Revelation Road is formatted in a very unique reading style. It's a novel for the first 120 pages, and it's followed by 312 pages of extensive biblical commentary that supports what I said inside the novel. In essence, I paint the end-time scenario into a storyline, and it starts with a family going through a grandfather who's very concerned about that his grandson has been birthed into the final generation. The Bible is a central theme of the Bible, that there is a final generation, that there is an end times. And so he's concerned that his grandson has been born in that generation. So he's trying to prepare the lad for the end times. And what they face off with is apocalyptic events in the Middle East that leads into future terrorism in America. All very realistic potential scenarios that we need to be understanding could happen and be preparing for. Now, with that said, the book can be got at my website, prophecydepot.com, prophecydepot.com. It can also be got at Amazon and elsewhere. But what you're talking about, about this preceding prophecy, Israel has to become a wealthy country because we know in Ezekiel 38 and 39 that Russia is going to put this coalition together. We talked about it briefly earlier, to come against a safe-dwelling Israel that is very prosperous because they're coming for plunder and great booty. And so that Israel is starting to develop. It meets most of the criterion that Ezekiel said in Ezekiel 38, verses 8 through 13. It's dwelling. It's a nation that's being regathered out of the nations of the world. We know that's been going on since 1948 and ongoing. It's going to dwell in the midst of the land, but they have to dwell securely without walls, bars, nor gates, and they have to be extremely wealthy. These are prerequisites before this prophecy can happen. Well, Israel's not dwelling securely. It is gaining great wealth. They're finding natural gas deposits, and they've got a large supply of shale oil, and there's a lot of good things developing inside of Israel that way. But I don't believe they're the prosperous Israel that Russia would put together a formidable coalition to come down against a tiny Jewish state. Now, keep in mind that the size and scope of this prophecy of Russia's coalition would be as if America teamed up with Canada and Mexico to invade New Jersey. This is the comparable scenario that Russia puts together. Why do they do that? I mean, this little tiny Israel, Russia could take out Israel. Why do they need this big coalition? Well, Israel's not dwelling. Here's the problems I got with the fact that Ezekiel 38 and 39 is not yet ready to happen. Israel's not dwelling securely. They have Iran wanting to wipe them off the map. They've got the countries that share common borders with Israel, Lebanon, Syria, etc., that have been warring with Israel since 1948, and they're still in a state of war with Israel for the most part. We talked about the peace treaties with Egypt, Jordan, and paper thin. Well, they're not dwelling securely. They've got Hezbollah, and etc., and they are not probably as rich as they will be when Russia comes against them. Well, it's interesting, and this is when you were talking about Psalm 83, we should probably bring this up. I believe that Psalm 83, the Arab-Israeli war prophesied 3,000 years ago by Asaph, one of David's worship leaders, King David's worship leaders. It talks about an Arab confederacy that comes together, forms crafty counsel, comes together with one consent, a contemporary confederacy, not a list of Israel's enemies throughout time immemorial, a group that comes together, they convene, they put together a plan, and that plan is to cut the nation off, that the name of Israel is remembered no more. And it says in verse 12 of Psalm 83, they want to take the pastures of God for themselves. They want another Arab state. Probably if it were to happen today or soon, there would be another Arab state, and they want to call it Palestine. Well, the populations listed in Psalm 83 are not listed in Ezekiel 38. He omits them. He probably purposely omits them because they're involved in their own prophecy and their own confederacy. And so what you got, according to Asaph's people, his populations he lists by Edomites and Ammonites and all that in his time, today who they would be Hezbollah and Lebanon, would be Syria, would be Jordan, would be the Palestinians, Palestinian refugees namely, Hamas, it would be Egypt, and it would be Saudi Arabia, Israel's biggest enemy since it's become a nation in 1948, apart from Iran, of course, right now. They're going to want to come together and destroy Israel, a climactic concluding Arab-Israeli war. Well, I point out in Revelation Road that Israel wins that because God will not allow the Jews to be defeated.
Absolutely.
So they defeat that war. The Israeli Defense Forces are in Bible prophecy. I point this out in Israelistine, my first book, and Revelation Road, the new book. and Israel dwells securely. They take Arab prisoners of war. I point out the passages that spell this out. I'm not just taking guesswork here. I show the prophecies that point these out. I go so deep as to talk about if there'll even be Israeli casualties of this war, and how we can, the arguments that pro and con about that. And Israel can dwell securely, and they can tear down that partition wall, that 403-mile wall that separates them. And they can dwell securely without walls, bars, nor gates. And you know what? They will reach out. They will take some more land, and I show the prophecies that demonstrate that. They're only occupying a fragment of the promised land that was given to Abraham in Genesis 15:18, from the river of Egypt to the river Euphrates, probably from the Nile to the Euphrates River. And I show how they reach out and take a little more land, and in the process, they can become wealthy. They're dwelling securely. Probably take over some Arab spoils of war, because the actual word when Russia comes for plunder and booty is shalal, and it means to take spoil from the despoil. In other words, Israel gets spoil, and Russia wants to come and get it. So, we're looking, Dan, what we're looking at here are game-changing events with peripheral prophecies around them. So there'll be an Arab-Israeli war. From that, Israel will dwell securely. This is how I size it up. We'll certainly want your listeners to do their own homework. They can read my research in my books. Russia covets what Israel's developing, that greater Israel, that secure Israel, that wealthy Israel, puts together a predominantly Muslim coalition that will be very upset with Israel when they see what happens to their Arab brothers, the Muslims, and they're going to come against Israel, and they're going to want to wipe Israel out and take over the wealth and that sort of thing. And not the IDF, but God stops that, according to Ezekiel 38, verses 18 through Ezekiel 39, verse 6. Earthquake, fire and brimstone, every man's sword will be against his brothers. It says it's not the Israeli Defense Forces, it's the Lord that stops that. And he says, when it's all done, he has Ezekiel right in Ezekiel 39:7, I will uphold my holy name in the midst of my people Israel, not the church, in the midst of my people Israel, and the nation shall know I am the Lord. The Lord chooses this huge, most armed and dangerous Mideast invasion of all history to defeat it and to uphold his holy name, to let the world know he's the promise-keeping God of the Jews. Now, as you can tell, I'm long-winded. There are peripheral prophecies that we need to be watching for, not just these two big ones. It says in Isaiah 17 that Damascus will cease to be a city. It will be a ruinous heap. That's verse 1. Someday, Damascus, the oldest continuously inhabited city in recorded history, is going to cease to exist. And it says in verse 9, it looks like Israel is responsible for that, out of self-defense. Israel has nuclear weapons. Everyone knows that. And they could certainly take out Damascus. And if Damascus starts lobbing chemical weapons into Israel and has Hezbollah do the same, Israel, they're going to act decisively. This could happen. And, it says in verse 14 of Isaiah 17 that at eventide you see him, speaking of Damascus in a pronoun of him, and in morning he is no more. Overnight, Dan, Damascus ceases to exist. Now, if you woke up one morning and you saw that on the news, and I read about that in Revelation Road, that is a game changer, just like all these other things. I know we're running out of time, but I will bait your readers with this. Iran is in Bible prophecy, and Israel is about to strike Iran. We're pretty much convinced that's about to happen. But Iran is, the modern-day Iran today is in two Bible prophecies, not just the Ezekiel 38 and 39 under the banner of Persia. And in Jeremiah, a contemporary of Ezekiel writes in Jeremiah 49, verses 34 through 39, about Elam, E-L-A-M, which is where the Bushehr nuclear plant is today. It was an area that was around the Persian Gulf, sort of in west-central Iran. And do we have time to just briefly run through that one, or how are we doing on time here?
You got about 3 minutes, and I want to throw a couple things in.
Throw them in, then we'll see if we can get to this.
Okay. All I was going to say is, folks, also there's a lot of words out there that have been said that if Israel attacks Iran, that they will unleash many terror attacks against the United States, and Hezbollah has been south of the border working with the drug cartels in order to prepare for that. So we'll just have to see. But so just because even if America stays out of it doesn't mean that we'll stay out of it because of that reason. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, let's do that. Let's really. Okay. What's the takeaway of all this that we're talking about for us here in America and Christians in general? I would just invite your readers that I talk about a potential prophesied strike of Israel. It doesn't necessarily say who does it, but someone strikes Iran at the foremost of its might, and it looks like it creates a nuclear disaster. And I believe I wrote about that, and I spent a whole chapter and a half on commentary in Revelation Road explaining it in Jeremiah 49. So I'll leave it at that. It's one of the prophecies that people aren't talking much about that is probably for our time and probably could even happen this year. It creates a nuclear disaster, and there is fallout, and there is dispersion. Iranians leave the area. They have to. This is what Jeremiah is talking about. It does not seem to be a fulfilled prophecy. Okay, so if Israel strikes Iran, Iran probably then has Syria and Hezbollah, as well as Iran, maybe even Hamas, coming against Israel because Iran's not going to take a punch to the gut sitting down. Now, what does that mean? Well, the Strait of Hormuz probably gets shut down instantly, of which a quarter to a third of the world's oil comes through, and all of a sudden people in Wichita, Kansas, Dan, are paying $6, $7, $8 a gallon. Okay? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then all of a sudden, and there's been threats from Ahmadinejad and Ayatollah Khomeini that there would be unleashed massive terror on America. And it could be multi-pronged terror. ABC just came out with a warning recently that it could be multifaceted. You could have wildfires in the wilderness taking away the first responders and then getting struck hard elsewhere through other attacks in mainstream areas. I actually run a scenario with that multi-type thing in the novel where there's fires going on in the world, in our country rather, and then all of a sudden the first responders are going out, and then you've got dirty bombs going off in Yankee Stadium and elsewhere. Meanwhile, while they're recovering to that, there's suicide bombers going in Sabbaths and synagogues on the Sabbath. And I mean, these are all possible scenarios. How do you deal with that? That puts our country down on lockdown. And these are all very real concerns, not to mention the fact that you could have an EMP go off in this country. Iran's been practicing shooting off missiles that burst up in the air at 180 miles, which is the burst altitude, the desired burst altitude of an EMP, electromagnetic pulse, shutting down the country, societal functions. Anyway,
let me intercede. We're at the end. I'm going to have to butt in, but now let me say this. So this book that I'm holding, Revelation Road, you give a lot of these things in this book, correct?
We cover it all in great detail, and it is also a book that's an evangelical tool, and that's the Hope Beyond the Horizon. Okay. It has got the gospel throughout it. There's an appendix in there is how to get saved, and so this is the good thing about the book. It's just not a bunch of doom and gloom about a family going through the end times and explaining how these prophecies can happen. It's like, well, what do you do with it? How do you bring people to the Lord that when these events start to happen, this book can help these people realize, look, this was in the Bible, and what's the end game here? Well, it's Jesus Christ. It's about Jesus. You need Jesus. He's in control. He's the one that's telling us what's going down.
Amen.
He loves us.
I'm going to have to get out of here with you. The book, folks, is Revelation Road, Hope Beyond the Horizon. Bill Salus, who we've been talking to, and you can find you at what's the web address?
ProphecyDepot.com. Prophecy Depot like HomeDepot.com.
All right, Bill, I'm going to have to let you go, and we will talk again. All right, be blessed. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
All right, folks, a lot of things to think about.